What up? My name is Brian. I wanted to quick introduce myself before I get the video started. I have been doing graphic design for vintage tees since 2013. I worked for about 8 or 9 years at a company called Tailgate Clothing that was bought by American Eagle. After that, I worked for another company called Original Retro Brand. I was at Charlie Hustle for about a year, and then since January of 2023, I have been doing freelance full-time. So I have my own graphic design firm that I do vintage tees, and then I also own my own line of tees, Nifty 50 Apparel. You can see some of the stuff that we have at nifty50apparel.com, nifty50apparel.com. I wanted to kind of film my process a little bit and show you guys the way that I put some graphics together. This particular one is for one of my clients, Soda Clothing Company. They wanted something for the Minnesota State Fair. They've got a pretty iconic cup of French fries they wanted me to do a rubber hose illustration of and then build a graphic around that. And so I wanted to kind of take you guys through what I do and show you some of the process that I go through to handcraft my graphics and kind of put things together. Enjoy. Okay, so the client wanted something to look like a rubber hose illustration of the French fry cup that they have at the Minnesota State Fair. I put this together in Photoshop. I'm not going to show you the whole sketch process. It's kind of boring, but a lot of my sketches do look like 30s, 40s cartoon illustrations. Now, as you can see here, they sent me a pretty detailed brief of what they wanted. They had some inspiration images to kind of build off of and some directions on what they wanted the graphic to look like, which really helps a lot if they have kind of detailed instructions on what they want. Okay, so I do all this with the brush tool. Never mind this first one here. I had the wrong swatch selected, so let's go ahead and undo that. I do it all usually with like a really bright magenta. Reason being, I will never use that color in any graphic I put together, and it really helps you to sort of understand what needs to add color and what doesn't. It stands out really strong. If I did it in black, you wouldn't really be able to see where the lines are. I'm going to go ahead and speed things up a little bit here so that you can not have to watch me do the entire thing in real time. So what I'm doing here is kind of laying down the base layer. I know there's lots of different ways to put together sort of cartoon illustrations. The way that I do it, I make the back layer first and then put all the layers of color on top of that. It just kind of helps me to keep things separate, keep things looking neat. I don't worry about gaps anywhere or trimming or having any issues where things don't quite look right, or I have, issues with pathfinding later on when I go to make any adjustments or modifications to it. In a sec here, you'll kind of see the way that I fill in the color. It's a little bit different. I know there's better ways to do it probably and faster ways, but this is the way that's worked for me, and it's just kind of the way that I've always done things. Okay, so in a sec you're going to see me use a macro that outlines the layer and merges it all together in Pathfinder. It's a little trick that I use. It speeds things up quite a bit to use the macro. Once I have the layer itself, kind of the background made, what I always do is put a layer right behind it. I draw a box, cut it, put it behind it in different colors so I can see where the areas are. Then I Pathfinder it to trim it, get rid of the outside, get rid of all the gaps in the middle and the inside. Then I merge that all back together in Pathfinder again to make one solid layer, drop that to 35% so I can see the sketch underneath, and this is what I'm going to be drawing on top of to add all the colors to the graphic. So here is the same process that we use to build the outline of the graphic, the base layer. The cup is a red and yellow pattern to it, and so with PMS 187 is kind of the red that I always use, my standard red. I draw with the brush tool around the outside and the inside, and kind of I'm making the outline of the illustration. It's not supposed to be perfect because vintage stuff never looks perfect. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine to see a vintage graphic that everything looks perfect. What you see me doing, I always start on the inside of the shape and then go to the outside. If you try to start right on the line, you get weird areas where your vectors are going to overlap and it doesn't look smooth. So I always try to go from the inside, then I try to match up the angle of the line when the new segment of the line overlaps with the old segment, so you get a smooth shape. Every once in a while it kind of has a little bump to it, so I'll have to go back and fix those areas, but with vintage graphics I'm never trying to make it look perfect. When I was at Tailgate, my first full-time design job, my boss about 3 or 4 months in said, your vectors are perfect. I got really excited. She's like, no, that's not a good thing. Everything needs to look a little bit worn in, like it's been through the wash a million times. That's how vintage graphics are supposed to look on a tee. And so I really had to work to figure out what is messed up enough to look authentic but not look bad. And so when I'm doing these, I'm never trying to get perfect fidelity, perfectly smooth vectors. Vintage stuff never looks perfect. If this is supposed to be a shirt that's been through the wash over and over again since the 70s or 80s, it's not going to look right. It's going to have bumps. It's going to have rounded corners. There's some of the plastisol is going to wear away over time. And so this is kind of a trick that I use to make everything look good but not perfect. Line should be a little bit wobbly, corner should be a little bit rounded. Okay, so now that we have all the red done, we do that same macro that I used before to outline my vectors. I merge that together to make one solid shape, and then you're going to see me put that same kind of square behind everything, and then we're going to merge that together to make a solid layer of red that's going to be most of the body of the cup itself. So now that I've got that done, I dropped it on 35% again, so you can see the sketch underneath. I have red and yellow kind of guides for me to use there, and then I do the same thing. We're going to mask this anyway, so it doesn't matter that I'm inside the lines at all, as long as I follow that kind of cyan line on the inside to show me where the stripes on the cup are supposed to be. But outside the lines, really doesn't matter. We're going to mask this up anyway. It makes it a whole lot faster, not to have to worry about being exact on the lines or anything like that, unless it's going to be an area where the colors are going to be different. So we're going to do the same thing with the brush tool. Go ahead and draw our stripes in there. You're going to see me fuck up here a little bit. That's all right. Go ahead and redo that because the lips are going to be red. They start in the red. They need to end in the red. Otherwise, it's going to look kind of weird and a little bit wonky. There's an example of me fixing a little bump in the line where the two vectors overlap. Once I've got all that done, I do the same trick with a Pathfinder to make this a solid shape. Then I go ahead and take the red layer underneath, put it on top, make a copy of it, mask that up, and now my yellow is all done. Put the red back to 100%. Now basically the body of him is finished. We go on to do the eyes next, exact same thing I've done before, and we'll go ahead and speed things up because you guys kind of know the process at this point. Now we just do the exact same thing for all the other colors, fill in the arms. I kind of tend to group things together if they're going to belong together. That way if I do want to change colors, which I wouldn't really on this one because there's kind of set colors I'm following anyway for the cup, and rubberhose characters always have, the white gloves and all that. That's kind of standard, but I'll do the shoes as one piece, the gloves as one piece, the arms, the legs. That way if I do want to quick change color, everything's already grouped together. I don't have to worry about going and selecting individual pieces to go ahead and do that. Now, I have kind of standard colors I use for most things. One thing I don't really have a set color for is like food and fried foods and the beiges and all that. So in a second here, you're going to see me play around with some of the different Pantone colors and kind of find the right one that I want to use for these. I looked at it and I'm like, I'm not sure if that's quite right. But, like I said, I group things together, so I can always change the color of this if I don't like how it looks. And it's kind of hard to tell when it's just the outline of the vector and you have the magenta fill. But that's kind of the benefit of always grouping things together, is that if I do want to change the color, it is super easy. You just click one time and fix the color on whatever it is. Here you see I forgot part when I made the sketch. There should be a little area there that gets filled in. I forgot to take that part out when I built the sketch in Photoshop. I don't like to freehand in Illustrator. I like to have everything set beforehand, kind of a persnickety thing, but I had to fix that part on my own there. Now here the character's all done. He's basically all colored up. I put the magenta back to black, back to 100%. This is a technically done vector. I don't love how he looks a little bit flat. If you look at the inspiration, it's got halftone dots for the shading. I think that's always a really great look whenever you're doing anything that's rubber hose, to go ahead and bring in those halftone dots. So now we're going to do what we did before with the masking, exact same thing, but we're going to add a layer of halftone dots on top to add some shading and give the whole thing kind of some depth and some shape to it. So I've got a pattern that I've always used for halftone dots. So see me bring it in here in a sec.
Masking it all up.
I keep it the same. It doesn't really matter.
I just kind of
But
copy
we're
that
going to
same
modify
swatch in
that
from
pattern
older
over
graphics
and
so that I
over
keep
again
them
to
the
just
same.
change the color
If
of
you
it.
guys don't know how to make patterns,
how to set
patterns
patterns
up,
up, I can do a separate video later on.
Work for yourself.
Kind of explain
the
the way
way
that the patterns work.
Just the exact same.
Once you get the scale right, you don't want the color on the pattern be duplicated,
small,
kind of wimpy. They don't really print
and that way all your patterns stay the same.
You don't want to be too big because you lose kind of that vintage feel about it. But I feel like halftone dots always kind of give that more authentic 1930s, 40s, 50s pop art feel whenever you're doing a rubber hose character. So here our guy now is fully done. There's halftones and everything. He looks really, neat and vibrant. Everything looks right. He's got some depth to him. This character is finished, and now we're going to add some text to kind of finish out the graphic and make it more ready for a t-shirt. Now we're going to add the text here. So I go with Subway Black for a lot of these looks. Cooper is a similar typeface. Cooper's really overused for me, so I go with Subway instead. You want to adjust your kerning, especially anytime you have a T next to an A. The T has that negative space in the bottom right, A has it in the top left. You get a pretty big gap there most of the time, so you want to adjust your kerning. I'm going to go ahead and give this a little bit of an arc here. Never, ever, ever stretch your type. The thing is, when you do warp it like this, it gets a little bit squished. So I do stretch it down a little bit just to kind of get back to that original shape. And then one thing that I always do with my type, especially on a vintage tee, I'm gonna redo the type by hand. I can't stand if I cross my eyes over two letters in a vintage graphic and they're the exact same. So I will always change the color to something bright and vibrant, and then I will go over it by hand again. I'm gonna use that same PMS 187C here to keep it kind of consistent looking. And I'll speed things up, but I do trace all of my type by hand. I'll do another video later on where I show you guys how I do script typefaces, because I do a lot of scripts and tails, and with script there's a lot more room to be more creative with some of your letter forms, but I can't stand it if vintage type looks correct and neat and nice. You want to have rounded corners, you want to have wobbly edges. It just looks so much more authentic and not like it was designed in 2025 trying to look like it was designed in 1985. we're going to add the secondary type. Go ahead and add state fair in there. Again, you want to adjust your kerning, especially anytime you have an A and a T. This does look a little bit tight, I'll give you that, but I think that this is about right. I hate having big gaps between my letters unless it's something I want to do on purpose. If I want it to be kind of more delicate looking, then I will track it all the way out and kind of open up the space. But for this, something a little bit tighter feels better for me. I play around here with the placement a lot. I never really know where I want secondary type to go. I do like to skew it up a little bit. It makes the whole graphic look a little bit less flat, a little more dynamic. I like to overlap type just a little bit. You never want to hide too much of the letter form, make it hard to read, make it less legible. But I do like to do a little bit of layering. It just kind of makes the whole graphic look a little bit tighter, a little bit more cohesive as a unit if you do it that way. One thing I'm noticing looking at this is how much slower I go with my type than with my illustration. I don't think I've ever really picked up on that before, but I think that with text, you do want to be a little bit more accurate. There's a little bit less room for error and to make things look a little bit too loose, whereas with the illustration, you're not really basing it on anything the person's familiar with, that the client is going to notice and say, oh, it's a little bit too loose, a little bit too tight, whatever. But with letters, you do want to be pretty close to what the original letter form looks like. The whole point here is just to have it so that you don't have those super sharp corners. Things should look a little bit softer, a little bit rounder. Again, if this is something that's been through the wash, 500 times over the last 30 or 40 years, things aren't going to look as tight as they did, when it came off of the screen printer that first day. At this point, all that's left really is the fine-tuning. You're going to see me mess around with the placement of the type a little bit. Once I like how everything looks and I think it's legible, I'll group it all together. And then the last step that I do on all of my graphics is I put them behind a weathering layer. I know that weathering layers sometimes can feel hokey. They can feel a little bit phony, sometimes look way too heavy or way too light. I made mine from scanning an old t-shirt of mine into my scanner. I put that into Photoshop, turned it into a bitmap, and that way the weave and the pattern of the fading looks accurate to the shirt. I hate if I look at a vintage tee and the way that they have their weathering layer set up, it looks really heavy or way too big or way too small or any of those things. And so mine actually matches the weave of, a shirt at full size. And so I think it does add that little bit to soften the graphic. Again, you're not making it look super, super, super fresh and brand new, but without making it look like this was something that somebody kind of, threw together in a couple of seconds to make it look vintage when it's really not. The very last thing you're going to see me do here is get rid of all the extra swatches in the art file. It makes your file size a whole lot smaller, especially if you have patterns in there. And also it makes it a whole lot easier for the client when they go to produce to have all the colors ready to go on the side of the board instead of having to kind of hunt down and color match things. If they're doing a screen print, the color count really matters. Sometimes only 3 or 4 is kind of all they have budget for. If it's direct to garment and direct to film, the actual number of colors doesn't really matter at all. But I do like to have the colors, correctly called out on the side of the artboard for them. It just makes things a whole lot easier instead of them having to try to figure out which colors go with which and color match everything. So now we're all done. I have this measured at 11 inches, which is kind of my standard for a shirt, 11 inches across or 11 inches tall. That's kind of the max. I like to go bigger than that. Looks really big and oversized. But all I have to do now is save this as a PNG so that I can send it off to the client for approval and find out if they like it or not. At this point, the graphic is finished. Everything's done. Illustration is done. Type is done. I've got it under the weathering layer. The ink colors are all called out. I just send that PNG over for approval. If they like it, I'll send them the vector file. Again, this graphic is for Soda Clothing. If you like this graphic here, I've worked with them for a long time. They are a Minnesota company. If you guys are from Minnesota, if you like Minnesota, this Up North Loon graphic is one I've made for them as well. If you want to get a look at all of my stuff I've done for them, they are at sotaclothing.com. That is SOTA clothing.com. The next graphic I'm going to make for you guys is going to be one for my company, Nifty 50 Apparel. That's nifty50apparel.com. I'm going to be doing one that's for our Boston collection. I do a lot of what you might call bootlegs or non-licensed professional sports graphics. I've gotten very good over the years at making graphics that allude to professional sports teams or college teams, but don't violate anybody's IP. They don't violate any copyright, so we're not going to get in trouble on that. But I'm going to go ahead and make one for the Boston Red Sox next. And if you guys like the graphics that I make, you want to see all of my graphics, there's hundreds of them on Instagram. My Insta is Brian_the_illustrator. If you guys are interested in having me make any graphics for you, for your companies, you can get in touch with me. My email address is brianthomascrooksllc@gmail.com. And if you do want any wholesale Nifty 50 graphics, I can do that for you as well. Email for that one is nifty50apparel@gmail.com.